Hi everyone, welcome to Practice ACT number 3. 60 questions, should have taken us 60 minutes, you're allowed to use a calculator. I'm going to go through this, will take us a little more than 60 minutes because I'm going to be explaining and not just doing them. Let's take a look at number 1. Point X is located at negative 15 on a real number line. And point Y is located at negative 11. What is the midpoint of the segment XY? Well, halfway between negative 15 and negative 11 is negative 13. And you could always do negative 15 plus negative 11 divided by 2 to find that midpoint. You'd have negative 26 divided by 2, or negative 13. So our answer here is A. 2. Given the triangle CDE with a right angle at point E, CDE with a right angle, 8, 10, what is the length of DE? Well, if we know our Pythagorean triples, this should be pretty straightforward, but if we don't, we probably have to use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 8 squared plus question mark squared equals 10 squared. 64 plus question mark squared equals 100. Question mark squared equals 36. So question mark equals 6. Remember, you have to take the square root at the end here. This is a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. Well, it's a multiple of a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. 8 is 2 times 4. 10 is 2 times 5. And so this side, because it's a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, must be 2 times 3, or 6. All right, what about, what was that? That was H. H for number 2. Number 3. 3 says, Lucy is studying her ant farm. She needs to approximate the number of ants. She realizes the number of ants, N, is close to 50 more than double the volume of the ant farm, which the formulas below expresses this approximation. Ooh, it's an approximation. I'm looking for 50 plus 2v, and I see 50 plus 2v as choice C. Choice C for number 3. Okay, so 1 is A, 2 is H, and 3 is C. 3 was just a direct translation. The number is close to 50 more than twice the volume. All right, let's take a look at numbers 4. 4 says Lisa has 5 fiction books and 7 non-fiction books on a table. She rushes out the door one day, takes a book at random. What's the probability she takes fiction? Well, remember, probability is success over total. We've got success is a fiction book. She had 5 of those. And total number of books is 5 plus 7. So this would be 5 over 12, which corresponds to choice J. J for number 4. 5. 5 says, in the spring semester of our math class, Katie's math test scores were 108, 81, 79, 99, 85, and 82. What was the average of her test scores in the spring semester? Well, remember, average is adding these numbers together and dividing by how many numbers we've got. 108 plus 81 plus 79 plus 99 plus 85 plus 82, all divided by 6. And when I do that with my calculator, I get C. The average is 89. Okay, number 6. 6, we've got some parallel lines. We've got H equals 12. We remember that parallel lines cut by a transversal means these alternate interior angles are congruent. So 3 is congruent to 5, and 4 must equal 1 plus 2. All right, which must be congruent? Oh, well, 3 and 5 must be congruent, and that was K. What was the point about knowing H equals 12? Nothing. Okay, I'm glad I studied geometry. I know alternate interior angles. Parallel lines cut by a transversal, alternate interior angles are congruent. So choice K, 3 and 5 must be congruent. Let's take a look at number 7. Gregor works as a political intern, receives a monthly paycheck. He spends 20% of his paycheck on rent and deposits the remainder into a savings account. If his deposit is $3,200, how much does he receive as his monthly pay? Well, so he got his pay and he took 20% of the pay out to pay his rent. The remainder is equal to what he deposits, $3,200. Well, 1p minus 0.2p is 0.8p equals 3,200. Well, so I need to divide both sides by 0.8, which is the same as 3,200 times 10 over 8. Well, that would go in 400 times. 400 times 10 is 4,000. And so I'm looking at A. 4,000 is my choice for number 7. How about number 8? Given parallelogram and parallelogram, and one of them is not shown. They are similar, though. Okay, so remember, when you have similar polygons, like A, B, C, and D, is similar to E, F, G, H, you know that the corresponding angles, like angle A and angle E, they must be congruent. But you know the sides are proportional. So AB is to BC as EF is to FG. We don't know how long they are. We don't know that they're congruent to each other. We know that the sides are proportional and the angles are equal. Okay, so what do we say here? Which of the two statements must be true? Corresponding angles are congruent. Oh, choice K. K for number 8. Wow, again, the numbers didn't play any role whatsoever in this problem. It's very interesting. I just needed to know my basic geometry about similarity. 9. A size 8 dress that usually sells for $60 is on sale for 30% off. Okay, so we're not paying for 100% of the dress. We're taking 30% of that price away. So we've got 60 minus 30% of, or times 60. You know, I like factoring, so I'm going to factor a 60 out here and get 1 minus 0.3, or 60 times 0.7, which is $42. So the dress is on sale for $42. She gets an additional 10% off the reduced price. So she gets 10% of this. 10% of 42 is $4.20. And she gets to take that off the $42 price. And so how much is she going to spend? Well, that would be $37.80, which corresponds with choice E. So we had to first figure out what 30% of the dress taken away from the price of the dress would be. That's leaving us 70% of the cost of the dress, $42. And then she got 10% off of that $42, or $4.20, off the $42. I guess another way of thinking about this would be the $42 minus 10% of $42. So she's doing 0.9. times 42, which is another way to get E3780. Okay, let's take a look at problem 10. I find 10 a problem that I have to think a little bit about. Problem number 10, if I say X is the number of chips that Aaron starts with, and then in the next hand, Aaron has, at a certain point in the game, Aaron has 3 chips more than Amy. So X plus 3, and that's Aaron, and Amy is X minus 3. Oh, can I say that? No, I can say what Aaron has. I know playing poker, at a certain point, she has 3 more chips than Amy. Oh, she has 3 more chips than Amy. So if Aaron has 3 more than Amy, let's say Amy has X chips, and Aaron has X plus 3. Amy has X, and Aaron has 3 more than Amy. Okay, then the next hand comes, and Aaron wins 10 chips away. 4 chips away from Amy. So that means Aaron goes up by 4, and Amy's goes down by 4. So now Aaron is going to be X plus 7, and Amy is going to be X minus 4. Well, how many chips apart are they? And so when I subtract one of these from the other, the x's cancel, and I get 7 minus a minus 4, or 11. They're 11 chips apart from each other. So I say 11 is J, and J is the answer to number 10. How about number 11? 11 says if y equals 4, then the absolute value of 1 minus y equals what? Well, that's 1 minus 4 inside the absolute value, which is negative 3 inside the absolute value, which is 3. And so I know that my answer then must be choice C for number 11. 12. And this may seem like a brisk pace, but we're actually taking more than a minute to answer each question, and you've got 60 questions in 60 minutes, so you really need to be going slightly faster than we are. Less time for explanation, I would say. And just do the problem. Okay, 12. Which of these is equivalent? Well, I've got 3a plus 2b, and I've got a minus b squared. Well, this is a foiling problem. 3a squared minus 3ab squared plus 2ab minus 2b times b squared is b to the third. So I've got 4 terms. I've got 3a squared minus 3ab squared plus 2ab minus 2b to the third, and this is choice K. A simple foiling problem. Okay, 13. 13 says for all real values of y, 3 minus 2, 4 minus y equals what? Well, let's see if we can distribute that negative 2, not just the 2, but the negative 2 properly. So I'll have 3, negative 2 times 4 is minus 8. Negative 2 times negative y, right? That minus times that minus is plus 2y. Well, here's some like terms I can combine. I get negative 5 plus 2y, or with the commutative property, 2y minus 5. So which choice is ours? 2y minus 5 is choice D. Choice D for number 13. Number 14. Which of the following is equivalent to y to the third raised to the eighth? Well, I remember when I raise a power to a power, I'm supposed to multiply those powers. So this would be y to the 24th. Y to the 24th is choice G. Choice G for number 14. 15. 15 says, the first day in the year is a Monday. What is the 260th day? Well, let's see now. If Monday is the first, Tuesday would be the second, Wednesday would be the third, Thursday would be the fourth, Friday would be the fifth, Saturday would be the sixth, and Sunday would be the seventh. So if I divide this number by 7, the whole number will be a Sunday. So 260 divided by 7 goes 350. Ooh, that goes 7 times, with a remainder of 1. Well, 37 weeks have passed, and that was late leaving us on a Sunday, but we're 1 day past Sunday, so this must be a Monday. The 260th day is a Monday, and that corresponds with A. 15 is A. All right, let's take a look at 16. 16 says the square has an area of 64 square units. Now we know the area of a square is side squared, and if 64 equals side squared, then the side, when we take the square root of both sides, the side length must be 8. What is the area of the largest circle that can be inscribed inside the square? Well, if I draw this circle that's tangent to each of these sides, or the midpoints of these sides, then I know when the side length is 8, this distance is 8. Well, that corresponds to the diameter of the circle. So the radius of that circle must be 4. The radius would be 4 for the largest circle inscribed, and we want to know the area. The area of a circle is pi r squared. Our radius is 4, so 4 squared is 16 pi. Our area is 16 pi, and that corresponds with choice H. Wow, there's a bunch of thinking there. 17. 17 says, what is the product of the solution of the expression x squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0? Well, if I factor this as x minus 7 and x plus 2, I know that the solutions occur at x equals 7 and x equals negative 2. The product of these solutions, 7 times negative 2, is negative 14, or choice A for 17. 17 is A. 16 was H, 17 is A. Let's take a look at 18. Factoring the polynomial x to the 12th minus 9 reveals a number of factors. Well, the first thing I notice is this is a difference of squares. Remember, a squared minus b squared factors as a minus b, a plus b. And we can factor this difference of squares as x to the 6th minus 3 and x to the 6th plus 3. Well, look here. Here's another difference of squares. This would be x to the 3rd minus square root of 3 and x to the 3rd plus square root of 3. This can't factor as a difference of squares without using imaginary numbers, so I can't take that any further. This could factor, no, it's not a square. So I don't think I'm going to take these any further. I could do sum and difference of cubes, but ew, I don't really want to do that there. So let's see what my choices for 18 are. Which is, these is not one of the possible factors. Well, I see here, this is choice F. This is choice G, the original, right? Because anything times 1. So that's a factor. So I've got F and G, these are present. X to the third plus root 3, that's this one. There's H. X to the third minus root 3, there's J. And so it looks to me like the one that's missing is K. K is the one I don't see here. So those are 16 through 18. Let's take a look at 19. What is the value of 2x plus 4 over 3x when x equals 1/6? Well, I think about a couple of different ways of solving this one, or evaluating this one, but I think the one that most students use is to directly plug the 1/6 in for each of these x's. So we have 2 times 1/6 plus 4 over 3 times 1/6. Now, when I simplify the expression on top, I get 1/3 plus 4 over 1/2. So this is 4 1/3, or 13/3 divided by 1/2. And as my 7th grade math teacher taught me, when I'm dividing with fractions, I can flip and multiply. And so that gives me 26 over 3. I get 26 over 3, which corresponds to choice C. Okay, problem number 20. 20 says you drive 60 miles at 90 miles per hour. How many minutes will this take? All right, well, we remember that distance equals rate times time. Our distance is 60 miles, and our speed is 90 miles per hour. So if I divide, I get 2/3 equals t. But wait a minute, this was 90 not miles per minute, it's 90 miles per hour. These time units are in hours right now, and the question said, how many minutes will the trip take you? So I need to convert 2/3 of an hour into minutes. Well, I know that 1 hour has 60 minutes. I can cancel these hours. I can even cancel here on the diagonal, and I get 40 minutes. The trip will take 40 minutes, and that's choice H for number 20. H for number 20. Okay, let's move on to 21. We're a third of the way done now. 21. The area of a trapezoid is found with this formula. Given the side measurements, what is the area in square inches of this trapezoid? Well, I notice that these two side lengths are the same. 3 root 2 and 3 root 2. I also know that this is 5 and this is 11. Well, if I draw in these heights, this would be 5. And this whole thing is 11. So how much do I have split for here and here? A total of 6. And because these sides are even, these have to be even as well. So each of these must be 3. And what kind of triangle is this that has 3 something and 3 root 2? Well, hopefully you recognize the special right triangle 45, 45, 90, whose relationship is x, x, x root 2 for the hypotenuse. So if this is 3, then this also must be 3. But let's say you didn't know that. Let's say you didn't recognize the 45, 45, 90. You were able to figure out that this side was 3. You know the hypotenuse is 3 root 2, and you know that this is a right triangle. So we can always use the Pythagorean theorem when we know 2 of the sides. We'll have 3 squared plus h squared equals 3 root 2 squared. So I get 9 plus h squared equals, I've got to square the 3, and I've got to square the root 2. So I get 9 plus h squared equals 18. I'll subtract 9 from both sides. I'll get h squared equals 9. And when I take the square root of each side, h equals 3. H equals 3 corresponds to an area of what? Well, let's use that area formula. Area is 1/2 the height, base 1 plus base 2. So I end up with 24 as the area. 24 as the area, which corresponds to choice C. C for number 21. Okay, 22. 22 says x is negative 2/3, x is 1/4 are roots of a quadratic, which then could represent the two factors. Well, so x equals negative 2/3. If I multiply both sides by 3, and then I add 2 to both sides, I end up with 3x plus 2 equals 0, right? And I'd be setting a factor equal to 0 to get that root of negative 2/3. So there's one of my factors, 3x plus 2. Hey, and 3x plus 2 only shows up in choice F. So I only need to worry about choice F. There's 22. Let's take a look at 23. In the rhombus below, the diagonal AC is 6 and the diagonal BD is 8. So we know that this is 8, and we know that this is 6. A, B, C, D. BD is 8, AC is 6. Now, you should recall two things about the diagonals of a rhombus. First, they're perpendicular. Second, they bisect each other. So this piece is 3, and this is 3. And this diagonal is 8, but it's being bisected by this diagonal. So this is 4 and 4. What is the length of each of the 4 sides? Well, look, we've got a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. If you didn't recognize the 3, 4, 5 right triangle, you could always use the Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 4 squared equals that side length squared. We've got 9 plus 16 equals the side length squared. 25 is the side length squared. And when we take the square root of both sides, I get s equals 5. S equals 5 is the side length, and that corresponds with choice C. Choice C for number 23. Let's take a look at 24. Rectangular rug has an area of 80, and its width is 2 feet shorter than its length. Well, 24. We know the area of the rectangle is 80, width and length. And we know that the width is 2 feet shorter than the length. We know that area is length times width, L times W. That's what 80 equals. And since W is L minus 2, I can rewrite this as 80 equals L minus 2. Or L squared minus 2L equals 80. And if I bring that 80 to the other side, I'll have L squared minus 2L minus 80 equals 0. This is going to factor. as L and L, and 8 and 10. Because this is minus 2, I know the bigger number has the minus and the smaller has the plus. This would give me L minus 10 equals 0, or L equals 10, and L plus 8 equals 0, or L equals negative 8. Well, I can't have a negative length, so the length of the rectangle must be 10. And what about the width? The width is L minus 2, or 10 minus 2 for 8. Okay, what did our question want? What is the length of the rug? The length of the rug is 10, and that corresponds to G. G for number 24. Okay, let's take a look at 25. On a Cartesian plane, a line runs through the point 1, negative 5, and through the point 5, 10. Which of the following represents the slope of the line? Well, I remember learning that slope was rise over run. So how far up do I go, and how far over do I go? Well, 10 minus a negative 5 over 5 minus 1. That's 15 over 4 is the slope, and that corresponds to choice E. E for number 25. 26. 26, the equation of the circle. Remember the equation of the circle, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where the center is located at hk. All right, so we see this equation, x plus 5 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 5. What is the center of the circle? Well, the center of the circle is located at negative 5, 5. And that corresponds to choice G. Choice G for number 26. 27. 27 says, which of the following best describes the domain of the function? Well, when I look at this picture, I notice that I'm not including 4 and I'm not including 0. So I want all the numbers in between 0 and 4, but not 0 and 4. Well, that to me looks like choice D, numbers in between 0 and 4 in set notation. I don't want choice A because 0 is not included. I don't want choice B because 0 is not included. Choice C doesn't work because here's 2. What about all these values that are in the domain, like 2.1 and 3 and 3.7? So, and all real values of x? No, because 4 and 0 are real values of x and they're not included. Okay, so choice D for number 27. Let's take a look at 28. 28. Amber decides to graph her office and the nearest coffee shop on an xy plane. Her office is at the point negative 1, negative 5. And her coffee shop is at 3, 3. What are the coordinates of the point exactly halfway in between? Well, if we're looking for halfway in between, we need the midpoint formula. So remember the midpoint formula. The x and y coordinates of the midpoint are found by taking the x values and averaging them, and taking the y values and averaging them. So if I do negative 1 plus 3 over 2, and negative 5 plus 3 over 2, I'm going to get 2 over 2, or 1, and I'm going to get negative 2 over 2, or negative 1. So 1, -1 seems to be the midpoint, and that occurs at point F, or choice F. 29. Okay, for a chemistry class, Sanjay is doing an experiment that involves periodically heating a container of liquid. The graph below shows the temperature of the liquid at different times during the experiment. What is the average rate of change in degrees during the times for which he's applying heat? Well, let's see. He's applying heat during the first 5 minutes. So we've got change in temperature over change in time. There were 5 minutes where he applied heat and we went up 40 degrees. And then 2.5 minutes goes by and he doesn't apply any heat. The heat remains constant. And then from 7.5 minutes to 10 minutes, that's another 2.5 minutes, he applies heat and the temperature goes up 20 degrees. Then he doesn't apply any heat from 10 minutes to 15 minutes and the temperature stays a constant 60. But then at time equal to 15, he starts applying heat for another 2.5 minutes and the temperature goes up to 80. 60 to 80 is a change of 20 degrees. So it looks like I have 80 degrees of temperature change over 10 minutes, which is 8 degrees per minute. 8 degrees per minute, and that corresponds to choice C for number 29. Number 29 is C. Okay, 30. 30 says if a to the x over a to the y equals a to the 5, we know that's the same as x minus y is 5. Okay, so the difference between two numbers is 5. A can't be equal to 0. Good. We don't have to do anything about that. It's just protecting us. Which of the following statements must be true? Oh, well, there it is. It's choice H. This was just a basic question using exponents. Okay, this is halfway through now. Halfway through. Let's take a look at problem 31. 31 says, what is the slope of the line given by the equation 8 equals 3y minus 5x? Well, in order to find out what the slope is, I need to get this into y equals mx plus b form, which means I need to solve the equation so it says y equals. So if I go back to this equation and add 5x to both sides, oops, not 8, but 5x, I'm going to have 5x plus 8 equals 3y. But I don't want to know what 3y is. I want to know what y is, so I'm going to divide everything by 3 to get y equals 5/3 x plus 8/3. There's the slope sitting in front of the x. The slope is 5/3. So that's choice E. Choice E for number 31. 32. 32 says, what's the least common denominator for these three fractions? Well, one of the fractions has 3 squared times 5. And another fraction has 5 squared, a 7, and an 11. And the last one has a 3 and an 11 to the third. Well, I need to have the biggest of each. I need to have 3 squared, I need to have 5 squared, I need to have 11 to the third, and I need to have a 7. So my common denominator will have all these elements in it. And that corresponds to choice J. J for number 32. 33 says multiply 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 over 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8 times 9 times 10. Well, I see 4, 5, 6, 7, and I see 4, 5, 6, 7, so they'll cancel. And I guess this 2 can cancel a 2 here, and this 3 can cancel a 3 here. So I've got a 1 on top. 4 times 3 is 12, times 10 is 120 on the bottom. 1 over 120 is what I get, and that's choice C. Number 33 is C. Let's take a look at 34 then. 34. Dave is in Pikeston and needs to go to Danville, which is about 110 miles south of Pikeston, and about 200 miles from Danville. From Rockville, oh God, I'm glad they labeled the picture. As he sets off on the trip, a plane takes off from Pikeston Airport and flies directly. Approximately how far is this? Well, you know, this sounds a lot like a Pythagorean theorem question. So 110 squared plus 200 squared equals our distance. If I take out my calculator, well, this is 40,000, and this is 10,000 and some more. So I want more than 40,000. Oh, I think I'm looking at choice K. I'd pull out my calculator just to be sure, but I believe that I'm looking at 12,100 plus 40,000, which is 52,100, equals question mark squared. And so question mark is the square root of 52,100. And that corresponds with choice K. 35. Suppose a second pentagon is overlaid. At most, how many points of intersection? Well, I got that if I overlay them this way, I'll only have 2 points of intersection. But what if I take the first pentagon and then the second pentagon and I overlay it exactly? They're going to touch at all these points. They're going to have an infinite number of points of contact. And so I'm going to say that E is my answer to 35. 35 would be E. Okay, 36. Microcorp will hold its annual picnic. It plans to assign duties to its employees. One person selects the venue. One person will arrange for catering. A third will plan activities. There are 10 people available for each of these jobs. So I've got 10 person for the first job. But then once I choose a person for that job, they don't do a second job. So I've only got 9 people to choose for my second job. And then once that person is chosen, I've got 2 people picked from the 10. And so there are only 8 people left who could do this job. And the counting principle says multiply these choices together, 10 times 9 times 8. And that seems to correspond with choice K. Choice K for number 36. Or 720 if you're multiplying it out. Okay, 37. I had to think a little bit about 37. I think I had to think about this one. Let's take a look at it again. I've got Q located at 1, 4, and I've got P located at 6, 2. And there's this line segment connecting them. Okay, which of the following could be the coordinates of R? P, Q, R. Well, notice they call it P, Q, R. PQR is a right angle. So there's a right angle here at Q. Looks like this, a right angle. And I could be going over here, or I could be coming back here. Now, what I know about this right angle has to do with slopes, right? So the slope of this and the slope of this, because these segments are perpendicular, these slopes have to be opposite reciprocals. So let's find the slope of QP. So that's going to be 4 minus 2 over 1 minus 6, which is 2 over negative 5. That's the slope of QP. But the slope of the perpendicular has got to be negative 5 over 2. Okay, so if I'm at the point 1, 4, 4 and 1, so I'm going to go down 5, that'll give me negative 1. I'm going to go up 2, that'll give me 3. Is negative 1, 3 an ordered pair? No. Well, what if I go in the opposite direction? That's this point here, negative 1, 3. But what if I go out in this direction? Well, my slope has to be negative 5 over, opposite reciprocal. Oh, I was supposed to flip the sign as well. Okay, so let's try this again. It's 9 over 3. 9, 3. Do we have that one? Yes, because I wrote it down wrong. The x's are on the bottom, 3, and the y's are on the top, 9. Oh, E. All right, sorry about that. We had to use the opposite reciprocal slope, not just flipping the slope, but also changing the sign. So I changed the sign and made this 5/2. I started at the point 4, 1, and I went up 5, so I added 5 here. At 1, 4, I added 5 to the y values, and I added 2 to the x values. That gave me a new x value of 3 and a new y value of 9. Whew, okay, so choice E it is for number 37. 38. Y equals 0.25, 100 minus y. Okay, so most students distribute, and we get y equals a quarter of 100 is 25 minus 1/4 y. I'm going to add a quarter y to both sides and get 1 plus 1/4, 4/4 plus 1/4, 5/4 y is 25. And if I multiply both sides by 4/5, I get that y equals 20. Y equals 20, and that corresponds to choice J for number 38. How about 39? X is between 0 and 180 degrees. We've got 4 cosine squared x equals 1. What do we know? Well, we know that cosine squared x would have to be 1/4. And when we take the square root of both sides, cosine x would have to be plus or minus 1/2. Well, when is cosine, the x value on our unit circle, equal to positive 1/2? That happens at 60 degrees. When is the x value equal to negative 1/2? That happens at 120 degrees. I'm glad I know my unit circle. That makes these problems much easier. I don't see 120 as one of my choices, but I do see 60. Choice B is my answer to number 39. Okay, 40. 2/3 of the way through. Let's go. Danielle's living room is a rectangle with dimensions of 16 by 18. 16 by 18. She puts a rug whose diameter is 12 feet into the room. .12 feet is the diameter, which means the radius of the rug is 6. Approximate the area of the bare floor. So here's the bare floor. And that sounds like it's going to be the area of the rectangle minus the area of the circle, which is going to be 16 times 18 minus the area of the circle is pi r squared, or pi times 6 squared. So 16 times 18 minus 36 pi. And what do I come up with that? When I use my calculator, I come up with a number remarkably close to 175. Note it says what is the approximate area, so they're expecting me to round here. That's why choice H is my answer. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. The next question is number 41. .41 says, which of the following intervals is the average rate of change the greatest? Well, remember that average rate of change is a synonym for slope. So when they ask me where the average rate of change is greatest, they're asking me when the slope is most positive. The slope looks most positive between 13 and 14 minutes, and so that's 52 minus 39 over 14 minus 13. I can always check all the slopes between all the pairs, but you know, when I look at this picture, this slope here doesn't look as steep as that one. This is a negative slope. This is a negative slope. This is a positive slope, but it doesn't look as steep as this slope. So between 13 and 14 would be my answer here, and that's choice E. The only way I could get this by using the slope formula is by finding the slope between every two pairs, and that would drive me crazy. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to know that average rate of change is slope, and slope would be greatest where the segment is steepest. Okay, let's take a look at 42. 42 says, what is sine of theta? Okay, well, they've given me a theta here, and they said that this is the ordered pair 2 root 3 comma 2. Well, that means that this is 2 root 3, and this is 2. So what trig ratio uses the side opposite the angle theta and the side adjacent to theta? That would be tangent. Tangent uses opposite over adjacent. And so in this problem, tangent theta equals 2 over 2 root 3, or 1 over root 3. So now they're asking me, what's the sine of this? Oh no, they don't want to know tangent, they want to know sine. Well, I remember that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. How am I going to find the hypotenuse? It's not given to me in this problem. Well, I see a right triangle, and so I know that the Pythagorean theorem will work here. Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or 4 plus 2 squared is 4, root 3 squared is 3, equals h squared. 4 plus 12 equals h squared. It looks like 16 equals h squared, so h equals 4. And remember, we were looking for sine, and sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse, or 2 over 4, which is 1/2. That corresponds to choice F. You might have recognized this as a 30, 60, 90 right triangle, and the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. So we're happy with this answer, 1/2, for number 42. Okay, let's take a look at 43. 43. Magnitude of an earthquake on a Richter scale is determined by R equals log A over A sub O, where A is the maximum measured by the sensor and A sub O is the threshold. Well, it says that the measured amplitude was 3,000 times A sub O. So that tells me that A is 3,000 A sub O. So I've got R equals log 3,000 A sub O over A sub O. I cancel out the A sub O's. R is log of 3,000. And so when I pull out my calculator and say, hey, what's the log of 3,000? I get 3.47712, which is awfully close to 3.5. And so my choice is choice C. Okay, 44. If M is randomly selected from set P and N is randomly selected from set Q, what is the probability that M times N is even? Oh my goodness. You know, this might be one of those problems that you might just want to skip. But if you don't want to skip it and you want to try and figure it out, that M times N is an even integer. Okay, well, let's think about this. I could take this 2 from set P and multiply it from a 1 in set Q, a 2 in set Q, a 3 in set Q, a 4 in set Q. And all of these will give me even numbers. Or I could take the 6 from set P and multiply it by each of those values in Q. 3 and 4. So right now it looks like I've got 8 choices, but notice I could take that 3 from set P and multiply it by the 2 in set Q and get another even number. What if I took the 3 from set P and multiplied it by the 4? That would give me an even number. Okay, and the last thing I have to check is the 5.5. 5.5 times 2? Well, that's 11. That doesn't give me an even number, so that doesn't count. But the 5.5 in set P times the 4 in set Q, well, that would give me 22, and that is even. So how many evens did I have? I had 4, I had 8, 9, 10, 11. I had 11 evens, and how many possibles were there? Well, there were 4 numbers in set P times 4 numbers in set Q, or 16 possible. There were 16 possible combinations, or 16 possible products, and 11 of those 16 yielded even numbers. So 11 over 16 is my answer, and that corresponds with G. This is a tough problem. I would be fine if you were my student and you said you wanted to skip this one and move on, because this is a problem that's going to take you some time, and you don't have time on this test. Come back and do this one later if you want. Okay, 45. Which is the complete solution set to absolute value of 2z minus 3 is greater than or equal to 7? Okay, so let's do 2z minus 3 equals 7 and 2z minus 3 equals negative 7. I've got the positive component, I've got the negative component, and I'm going going to add 3 to both sides and get 2z equals 10, or z equals 5. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get 2z equals negative 4, or z equals negative 2. Now these are my critical numbers, and I want to test the intervals in the original inequality. Remember the original inequality, 2z minus 3 is greater than or equal to 7. So if I plug in a number in between negative 2 and 5, like 0, 2 times 0 is 0, minus 3 is negative 3. The absolute negative 3 is 3. Is that greater than or equal to 7? Nope. But if I put in a number over here like 10, 2 times 10 is 20, minus 3 is 17. The absolute value of 17 is 17. Is that greater than or equal to 7? Yes. And if I try something over here like negative 3, I'll have negative 6, minus 3 is negative 9, but the absolute value of negative 9 is 9, and that is greater than or equal to 7. So I get a yes there as well. So I want all the numbers less than negative 2 and all the numbers greater than 5. So that seems to correspond with choice B. Choice B for number 45. Okay, let's take a look at 46. Says, which trigonometric function is equivalent to sine squared over cosine x tangent x? Well, I remember that tangent is sine over cosine. So I can write this problem this way. And then I notice I can cross out these cosines. And so I've got sine squared x over sine x. And then this one can cancel one of those, and so I'm left with sine x. So I think my answer is sine x, or h. 47. Let's take a look at 47. A does not equal b, but we know that ax minus bx over 4a minus 4b is less than 0. Well, I notice that I can factor an x out of the top, leaving me a minus b, and I can factor out a 4 from the bottom, leaving me a minus b, and these will cancel, and so I get x over 4 is less than 0. If I multiply both sides by 4, I get x is less than 0, and that's choice D. Choice D is my answer here. This looked like a scary problem all full of letters, but really it turned out just to be a factoring and canceling problem, and then I had to solve the inequality by multiplying both sides by 4. Okay, number 48. The volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h, where r is the radius of the base and h is the height. If the radius is halved, okay, so I want half of the radius, and the height is doubled, I want 2h. Don't forget the 1/3 pi here. What's the new volume going to be with respect to the old one? We want a ratio of new volume to old. Well, let's see. I've got to square the 1/2. That's going to be 1/4. I've got to square the r. So I'm going to have 1/3 pi times 1/4 r squared times 2h. Well, I see that this 2 and this can cancel. And I've got 1/2 times 1/3, which is 1/6 pi r squared h. There's the new volume. And they wanted us to compare that to the old volume. And the old volume was 1/3 pi r squared h. Well, these are the same, and these are the same, and these are the same, and so I get 1/6 divided by 1/3, which is 1/6 times 3 over 1, or 1/2. I get 1/2. So that corresponds to, oh, sorry, I need to do it this way. This is new, and this is old, and we're looking for the ratio of new to old. So we want 1 to 2. And 1 to 2 corresponds with choice J. J for number 48. Okay. 49. Al bikes to the top of the hill and back. He bikes up the hill in m minutes and returns twice as quickly downhill. Okay, so if it takes him m minutes to go up the hill and he goes down twice as fast, it takes him half as much time. It only takes him a half of that number of minutes. His total number of minutes then was m plus 1/2 m, or 1m plus 1/2 m, or 3/2 m. But that's a number of minutes. And here the question says, what's the total time in hours? So I have to get rid of minutes. I know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. And so I can do some canceling here. And I get m times 1 over 2 times 20 minutes. I'm sorry, hours, because those are my units now. And m over 40 corresponds to choice B. Okay, 50. Let's take a look at 50. A cylindrical cup with an interior radius of 5 has an ice cube with side lengths of 3 in it. 3. Height is 9. So which of the following expressions gives the volume of the lemonade poured into the cup? Well, the volume of the lemonade is going to be the volume of the cup minus the volume of the cube. The volume of a cylinder is pi r squared h, and the volume of that cube is side cubed. So we've got pi times 5 squared times 9 minus 3 to the third. And which choice is this? Well, that looks like pi, 5 squared, and a 9, and then minus 3 to the third. That's choice G. 51. 51 says, circle inscribed in square, x is the distance, so we know that this is x. If we went out the other side, this would also be x. But I actually want to draw in this, because when I draw in this is my radius. And the diagonal of the square takes this right angle and turns it into 45 and 45. And so what I'm really looking at now is x, r, a right angle, and a 45, 45, 90. Okay, so how long is this side? Well, we know in a 45, 45, 90, if these angles are the same, then the sides opposite must be the same. So I know that the side lengths are r, r, and x. Well, we're asked to say what's the length of the radius in terms of x. Well, according to the Pythagorean theorem, r squared plus r squared should equal x squared, or 2r squared should equal x squared. And we need to solve this for r, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2 and get r squared equals x squared over 2. And then I'm going to take the square root, and I'm going to get x over root 2, which, when I rationalize, becomes x root 2 over 2. And that's choice D. D for number 51. I had to be pretty comfortable with my right triangle geometry for this problem and my Pythagorean theorem. Okay, let's take a look at number 52. 52 says, what's the value of A that makes the equation above? Well, I know that when I'm multiplying matrices, the first matrix provides a row, and the second matrix provides a column, and that top row, first column, would fill in this box in the top row, the first column, or 35. And so I see that 4a times 2 plus 3 times 4 plus negative 1 times 1 should equal 35. 8a plus 12 minus 1 equals 35. 8a plus 11 equals 35. 8a equals 24, and so a equals 3. When a equals 3, this equation is satisfied, and that happens with choice K for number 52. Okay, if you don't know how to multiply matrices together, skip this question. Don't waste your time trying to figure it out. If you do know how to multiply matrices, then this question should be pretty straightforward for you. 53. Okay, a pipe at radius of 4 on this end splits into 2 pipes that deliver the same amount of water. Well, I don't want to assume that these pipes are half as big as that. I know that they're the same size because they each give the same amount of water, but we want the smaller pipes to have exactly half the water flow. Well, the area of this circle, pi r squared, is pi times 4 squared, or 16 pi. Since these have half the flow, we know that they should be 8 pi, is pi r squared. So to find the smaller radius, I need to divide by pi and get r squared equals 8, and then when I take the square root of both sides, I get r equals the square root of 8, or 2 root 2. 2 root 2 corresponds with choice C for number 53. Okay, let's take a look at 54. Cross-section view of a tent is shown. If the tent is 6 feet wide at the base, which of the following could be used to find the height? All right, well, let's see what we know. We know that this is 6. We know that these are both 40. And since these are equal, these side pieces must be equal. So this is 3, and this is 3. And here's the height of the tent. Well, if I think just about one of those triangles, 3h 40 degrees, which trig ratio uses opposite and adjacent? Well, we said earlier the tangent used opposite and adjacent. And I want to know what h equals, so I want to solve this equation for h. I'll multiply both sides by h. But I need h by itself, so I'm also going to have to divide both sides by tangent 40. And so I get h equals 3 over tan 40. 3 over tan 40 corresponds with choice H here. Choice H for number 54. Okay, 55. Which of the following sets has the lowest standard deviation? Well, we remember that standard deviation is the spread of the data. What's the spread, the difference in all the data points? And when I look at the difference in data points, like set B, the points are 100 apart from each other. And in A, they're 5 apart from each other. But when I get down to choice D, I see that the spread is actually quite small. The spread goes from 0 at 100 to 1 at 101 and 2 at 102. So the least spread happens with choice D. Not going to worry about any computation there. I just need to know that that standard deviation is most easily understood as the least amount of variation in the data. And my data is most closely bunched together with choice D. Okay, 56. 56 says for all integer values a and b such that a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, which of the following must also be an integer? Well, when I look at this one, I see 3 raised to all these wacky powers. And a is a positive number, b is a negative number. So if I do a positive plus a negative, well, that could give me a negative number. And 3 to a negative number would be something like that. Well, 1 over 3 squared or 1 over 3 to the third, that's not an integer. So that's not going to work. But if I do 3 to the a minus b, I'm talking about subtracting a negative number. That's a positive number minus a minus or plus. Oh, well, this is always going to give me a positive number. 3 raised to a positive number is always going to be an integer value. It'll be 1 or 3 or 9 or 27 and so on, but always an integer. So I like 3 raised to the a minus b, and that corresponds with choice G. Choice G for 56. 57. Let's see. X, Y are real numbers such that y over x. Now, that's interesting because in order for y over x to be bigger than y, we know that this has to be smaller than 1. So if y equals 1, then x is between 0 and 1. And y then, this relationship is 1, right, because y was equal to 1, and some number between 0 and 1. Okay, good so far? Maybe, maybe not. Give forth all the values for which y over x could have. Well, remember that we said that x was some number between 0 and 1. Well, that's a number like, I don't know, 1/2. So I've got 1 over 1/2, which is 1 times 2 over 1, or 2. Or x could be 1/10, which is 1 times 10 over 1, or 10. I guess it could even be 1 over, I have to be less than 1. So how about 0.1? Ooh. So that's going to be the same as 1 over 1 over 1/10, or 1/10. No, sorry. I want to do this right, but I've run out of space. 1 over 1/10 over 1. Yeah, that's 1/10. When I plugged in 0.1. No, sorry, that's not going to work. I need numbers between 0 and 1, and 1 over 1/10 was 10, so that doesn't work. Okay, well, what do I notice? I notice my values are 2 and 10, and if I do 1 over 1/100th, I get 100, and so it looks like all the values that are bigger than what? Well, are they bigger than 1, or are they bigger than 0? I think for number 57, we recognize that these values have to be bigger than 1, right? Because this is that bounding thing that I couldn't, like I could keep coming up with numbers where the denominator was bigger and bigger, but if I made this smaller, like if I made it 1 over 1, well, then I'd have 1 divided by 1, which is 1. I can't include 1, but I can go up to 1. So I'm going to say choice A for 57. But again, if you find some of these problems really tricky, they're at the end for a reason. These are some of the hardest problems here at the end. And don't be afraid to use your time differently throughout the test. You can go quickly through the ones you're comfortable with, and if you have time left over, spend more time thinking about these ones that are tougher. Okay, 58. 58 says, a circular running track is being built in a fenced-in athletic field, and we're assuming that this athletic field is 100 feet wide by 150 feet long and is a rectangle. We're going to put a circle in here, and we know that the border between the circle and the track has to be 10 feet. So we've got 10 feet and 10 feet. Well, we know that this whole distance is 100, and if I take off this 10 and this 10, I've got 80 feet left here for the diameter. If the diameter is 80, the radius must be 40. Okay, what's the radius of the largest track? Oh, 40. So that's choice F. That wasn't so bad. 59. A sphere is cut in 2 different planes, dividing it into sections. How many possible sections could we end up with? Well, let's think about that. If I have a sphere and I cut it across the middle, I'll have 2 pieces, and I cut it across this way, I get 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. Well, how else could I cut this? I could cut it here, but what if I made another cut parallel to the first cut? I'd have 1 section, 2 sections, 3 sections. Well, I know that 4 and 3 are solutions to this problem. So choice A doesn't work, that says 2 only. Choice B doesn't work, which says 2 or 4 only. Choice C doesn't work because it says only 3. So my only 2 that I have are D and E. Is there any way I can cut this sphere not once, giving me 2, but twice? Well, what if I made the second cut the same as the first cut? Well, then I'd have 2 pieces, except that it says cut by 2 different planes. So I can't cut the same cut twice, which means I can't end up with 2 pieces. I can only get 3 pieces or 4 pieces, and so that's choice D. Choice D for number 59. And finally, number 60. For all real values of A and B, the equation absolute A minus B equals 5 can be interpreted as the positive difference between A and B is 5. What is the positive difference between the 2 solutions? Well, I remember that the solutions can be the positive solution and the negative solution. So if I add B to both sides in each of these equations, I'll get that A equals B plus 5 and A equals B minus 5. Now it says what's the difference between these 2 solutions? So one of the solutions was this one, and the other was this one, and I want to know the difference between them. So b minus b, well, that cancels the b's, and 5 minus a negative 5 is 10. The positive difference between these two solutions is 10, and that corresponds with choice K. Choice K for problem number 60, our last problem. You have an hour to do 60 questions. I don't know that you're going to have time for worrying about problems like 56 and 57, but if you do, they're good things to think about. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Please ask questions about any that you're still not sure about.